I do want to get to the TFC story here, right? We have to. We've got a massive group of fans who listen and watch us here. Now, let's just go back. I'll let Jimmy take over shortly because you guys have got some great stories, I'm sure.
Back in time. Let's take the DeLorean back to...
Well, I'm just curious, like, I think it's Kevin Payne was the GM or president when he hired you, but you were still playing at QPR when you were hired as head coach at TFC. How did that happen exactly?
Yeah, so Kevin met me in London and pretty much said he's taking over the job and he would like me to take over in the summer once the season was over. And I was done kind of mentally playing. It was just a tough environment, QPR, and body was breaking down, anything like that. And so he just kind of said, look, I'd take over now. Like as soon as, January kind of things, I'll give QPR the window to replace me, and then I need to get going from the start kind of thing, so we can have a preseason, we can start doing these things. So when I look back, it's so naive of what I was saying, because I was just a young, confident man who thought he could just take on the world and just let's go do this kind of thing. Very, 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 very naive. Didn't really understand I should have. I don't understand it, but I should have done my due diligence first on what the salary cap was doing and the players and the management and where that whole mess was there. But I knew Jimmy Brennan was going to be involved, so that was one of the main motivators to kind of do it. I jumped on the plane and the first straight to Jimmy. What the hell are we going to do now?
Jimmy's saying to you, "What the hell are we going to do now?"
But it was difficult. Like, I mean, we couldn't tell the fans that 5 players were taking up 81% of the salary cap, and 3 of them had long-term injuries. So that as a first-time coach, you're going into these scenarios where you literally got 19% of your salary cap has got to make up the rest of your squad. Yeah. You've got massive contracts on long-term players who were just on a gravy train, didn't want to go. The culture was pretty bad. People were working part-time, really. It was very amateur. They didn't really have an elite mindset. So we had to change that whole culture. We had to help change the whole work ethic. We had to change the whole squad. But you can't tell these to fans at the time, right? Like, because that's the most disheartening thing the fan never wants to hear. So you just got to eat it. You've got to work as hard as you can to kind of get through those tough stages and then build something that hopefully it has a bit of longevity.
Yeah, I remember the first couple of games when we were looking at the squad and we had all those injuries, and Stuart Kerr sat down on the bench and looked at us and went, "Boys, strap yourselves in, get the seatbelts on. This is going to be a wild one." We just felt looking at each other going, "Oh, for God's sake."
I mean, how the hell we got that amount of points that first year was miraculous, in all honesty. Looking at the squads now in MLS, and then you look at the squad that we had in that first year, was phenomenal. We even got to where we got. But yeah, it was. But the coaching staff was great. If I had to redo it again, there would have been a lot of things I probably would have done differently. I didn't manage up very well. It was very tough. You come from the Premier League and you come from the Premier League kind of mindset and expertise, which is pretty high level, right? You have to think like that or you get kicked out no matter what. In whatever job, whether you're the cleaner or the freaking coach or the CEO, you have to think at a pretty high level. So when I went into it and people just thought differently, I didn't have that management skill at the time to maybe kind of let's just say I was confrontational, probably more than management. I think that's probably right, Jimmy. I don't know how. It was very hard for me to kind of manage up. Was probably one of my mistakes that. But I just wanted to win so badly. I wanted to get it right. So and I didn't have time for bullshit in a way. And so if I had to do it again, I probably would have been a bit more political.
No, do you know what? And I've said it often, Nelly, when people say, working at TFC and what managers did you like? And I always said Ryan Nelsen for me I thought you were very good. Just the way you saw the game, and then we implemented in training. And we actually had a good style of football that we all bought into, and you could see the team performing on a week, and that's why we were in the playoffs when we all left, with 10 games left, 10 games to go, and I felt we were getting the best out of the players that we had.
Yeah, we're third. We're third with 10 games left. We're in a really nice spot, and we still had room for the salary cap to go again next year. We're in a really good spot. But there was people who wanted my job at the club, and there was some stuff going on behind the scenes, and I've got to admit now, like when I look back, I was run down, I was burnt. I didn't have the experience to probably manage the whole kind of on and off the field well, and I was burnt out in a way, and I think when Tim Lewicki came in, who I've got so much respect for, he could see it, and he knew that that probably my level of I suppose energy was and passion for what I was doing was dropping, because I was just it was a tough time, and so he kind of said that there's guys that he could bring in, that he's seeing that was more kind of his people, and so they took over the amount of hard work that we put in for the club to have a bit of success too. We cleaned up the salary cap. We had some phenomenal acquisitions and drafts that turned out to be, who I got ridiculed for, for some of those, the Nick Hadlins, the young left back who ended up playing for USA, and all these guys who had phenomenal careers. I was criticised. I was brutalised for doing them, but ended up being all right. Well, the staff, sorry, not me. The staff decided. So we set it up pretty good looking back. I'm very proud of what we actually did in the end, and in the end, they got their championship, and that's the main thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, the seeds were planted. I mean, to take the fans back, this was the bloody big deal era, right? With Jermain Defoe coming in, Bradley. Let me ask you this: when you first heard the slogan, "A bloody big deal," were you supporting of it, or were you like, "Oh Christ, here we go"?
Well, yeah, I think you know the answer on that.
We did have a laugh.
It's not really the Canadian and New Zealand type kind of mindset to do things like that, right? But Tim Lewicki was big dreamer, and he loved stuff like that. And I looked at Jermain was not, sure he could be phenomenal for Toronto, but you always look and when you make signings like that, is like, what can go wrong? Like, what's your exit? And Jermain would always have a market back in England. And so the worst case scenario, if it didn't work out, we could probably double our money in a transfer back to England for the multiple clubs that we did. And we could have at any stage. So you've always got to look. With Michael was probably the one, and I like Michael and I are great, but he's the one that I didn't want, in all honesty. There was no exit plan on that one. When you invest in that kind of player, you're in that style and that contract, you're done and dusted. He becomes, everybody else becomes collateral damage no matter what he does, because he's not leaving on that contract and that thing. So that was probably one of the ones that Tim and I really butted heads on. And by the way, fair play to Michael, and I'm good friends with him and all that kind of stuff. And, but that was that. And he didn't suit the style of play that we had, really, Jimmy, did he?
No.
He wanted at that stage to justify his paycheck by passing the ball out wide and then overlapping to get that pass and then crossing it into himself. It was kind of one of those ones at that stage. As he matured, he became a lot better in his role, but
yeah, there's a lot of pressure, right, on that kind of contract. You can imagine, right?
Totally.
I mean, as an American, it's it wasn't it? It's a massive contract at the time, and I know European-based people say, well, "How much are you paying him?" But it turned out well, like you said. I've got to ask you about Jermain, though. I mean, what happened with Jermain? And we all respect him. What a footballer! What a finisher! One of the best pure finishers I think England's probably ever produced. But it didn't pan out. Was it just simply a culture shock for him once he got here?
Yeah, I think so. I think, he homesickness. A lot of English players don't travel very well at the time. He's been the man playing at clubs where he's, football is number one, your family. He's very close to his mother. He was very, and when he went to Toronto for the first time, really, he didn't have those kind of home comforts and those kind of foundational, things that really helped him be the player and the personality that he was. They were kind of not there anymore. And so that was very difficult for him. I would say Jimmy would probably, would I don't know. What do you think, Jimmy? It just seemed like that.
Yeah, it was difficult for him, wasn't it? He didn't really settle at the time. We saw glimpses of what he could do, but I just felt that it was he was just keen to go back, wasn't he?
Yeah, we got offered close to 20 million transfer for him, and that was always the thing. Like that, there was always that worry, and we knew about it.
Yeah,
but with Jermain, you've always got to mark it back. You can always make, because we got him at a really good price, so we can always make money off him, and that was the thing. Like, yeah, but I think Toronto at the time, and quite rightly, didn't really think like that. They wanted, if they're going to sign a guy for that amount of money, that kind of profile, they want him to be around and bleed red and white TFC for years. So they didn't think about ever selling him, because that would look like potentially a mistake or something that went wrong. But it happens in you take people out of London to go up to freaking Newcastle and they struggle. It's just life in football. But I don't think the upper management saw it that way. They weren't used to that kind of stuff. David Beckham came to LA and he then did this and this and this. Yeah, but it's just a wee bit different. Every kind of situation is different.
It's too bad.
Sorry.
I was going to say, there's too bad that there's nothing in TFC's past that could act as a cautionary tale for today's iteration of TFC. It's a real shame.
Yeah. Do you follow TFC still, Ryan?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I am one of their biggest fans, and I've got so many friends in Toronto. I absolutely, I follow them all the time and looked at the Italian kind of experiment that not experiment, because they had in the past, but it was an interesting one. It was risky. I think when you get those wrong, if you do not have an exit strategy on those things, you have to have a parachute, right, that you can pull at any stage to rid you from that. But the MLS and the salary cap, you guys know this better than anybody, is it's set up that if you don't get it right, the cost is way more than firing a whole coaching staff is way more cheaper than getting rid of players if you do not have that extra strategy. And
that's a great point, actually. Yeah, because like you mentioned the Bradley situation, and it worked out in the end really well for TFC, but there was no exit. Then you got the Insigne situation. There's clearly no market for him back home. Clearly, otherwise he'd be back there by now.
Totally. And that has to be you always, when you're about to sign a player, you always have to you have to go through the process of what if things go wrong, and what's the worst case scenario here, and what can we do about it? And if there's a positive in the worst case scenario, like there was in Jermain, we could have sold him for, as I said, for 20 million. We could have made double the money and we could have moved on, right? But if you do not have that positive in the worst case scenario, then you have to really seriously think about it's a big call.
Yeah. Do you know, the other thing is too, Nelly, and we went through it quite a bit, was, just dealing with the egos of certain players. And I don't know if you remember the time. Do you remember in Houston with Gilberto?
Yeah.
We're about to start this match, right? And I come out and I put all the cones. We come back in the dressing room. And I think it was Stevie Caldwell goes, we're in trouble. I said, what do you mean? He goes, Gilberto says he's not playing. I said, what do you mean? He says he feels disrespected. And do you remember we come into the little room, and we're sitting there, we're going, we've got an issue here. And then you start going, what the hell are you talking about? This guy's not playing. And then he came into the office. Do you remember we sat down and we had to talk with him? And then I had to go out into the locker room, and I was like, Stevie, you've got to get the boys and get your arms around this guy because we need him today. Eventually, we had a big kumbaya. He went out, scored 2 goals, and we won the match.
It's stuff that you don't really think about that's going to turn up, right? Like, the guy that you're paying, pretty decent money to he feels disrespected because somebody probably like sneezed while he's talking. Like and then it's really hard. Like Jimmy's played at a really high level, and I've played at a real high level, and then you get players who are not really that level. You would never do that, Jimmy, would you? You
never in a million years
think about doing that, and you get a guy who's played at this level saying those things, and you're kind of like, what? You kind of go, what? You want to go, but but you have to, you have to obviously, people are different, cultures, humans, when you're a bit older, you kind of, you understand that, I think no matter who you are, whether you're the top or the bottom on the squad, it's human nature to want to feel respected, I suppose, and you have to, I suppose you have to look at it.
Yeah,
Ryan,
it was just so funny though the way it happened when you're talking to him and we're talking to the players and his arms are crossed. I'm not playing.
I can imagine Stevie as well.
And then he gets to the point where he's like, "Okay, I'll play. I feel good now."
Imagine Stevie Caldwell, Jimmy Brennan, and you, Ryan. I mean, you got kind of cut from the same cloth, you guys, a little bit, right? Not dealing very well with that.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's and again, that was probably again maybe when we recruited Gilberto, it wasn't we knew we could get him back to Brazil or he would have a market. We already knew, but we didn't think that he would not turn up to play one time because he was a bit sulky. That happens. I mean, I could tell you stories. In saying that, I can tell you stories at Tottenham when I was there that certain players in the locker room, high profile players, decided to have a back injury for 6 weeks because the manager said the wrong thing to them in a team talk. And I won't say he was on 6 figures a week and decided to have a back injury for 6 weeks when we're like second in the league, third in the league.
Jeez,
yeah, unbelievable.
It does happen. It's the world you live in.
Almost out of time here, Ryan, but I do need to ask you. If I don't, I'll be crucified by TFC fans. But one of the most surreal days for me covering TFC over all these years was when I woke up one morning and heard that Julio Cesar was coming to Toronto FC. I'm thinking, is there a different Julio Cesar? not the Brazilian number one playing at QPR. How did you convince him to come to Toronto for those few months?
Well, luckily there's a World Cup coming up in the summer, and he needed to play games. As simple as that. And the Brazilian coach had said to him, "Don't care where you play, you just need to play." And so Julio is just a phenomenal guy, and he wanted a different experience. And we pretty much I got a call pretty much from his agent to say, what do you reckon? Because he helped in other things and all that. And I knew Julio and I knew what he'd be like in the locker room. And it hurt as well because we had a really good goalkeepers. We had good goalkeepers. It's not like we needed a goalkeeper, but just his the way he works, the presence. He's a phenomenal human being, and just him being in the locker room. He was on, what was he on? Jimmy, he was on a 100,000 salary cap hit for us.
Yeah, right next to nothing.
It was on nothing. I think he was making about €6 million at QPR, and he came to us on 100,000 salary cap. I didn't play the World Cup for Brazil.
Yeah. It was brilliant when he walked in the dressing room. Everybody just staring, going, "Oh my God, it's actually him."
Yeah,
Such a great guy, though. He was brilliant in the dressing room.
Like, remember when he had to leave? He was crying. He had to leave. The guys were gave him this little present, and he was tears. I still see him occasionally. He still talks about the fans at Toronto, everyone at Toronto. He loves it. He loved his time in Toronto. It was so sweet.
Well, listen, Ryan, listen, this has been a really great chat. We could keep going on and on and on about a bunch of stuff here. But thank you so much for joining us. It's going to be an exciting summer with the Club World Cup. And I think the TFC faithful will really enjoy this as well. They got a lot of questions about that era, of that kind of strange era, just before the success came, right?
Yeah.
And what Cesar planted. I think we've got some good answers today.
Wow, no, it was an amazing experience. I look back, I enjoyed it so much, and I hope the Canadian fans do travel down to America. I know probably right now they but that politics aside, get down there and try and enjoy a whole lot of watch.
It is Liberation Day, Ryan. We're all liberated today. Just so you know,
that's right. It is, isn't it?
We're super happy about the 49th parallel right now.
I'm waiting for him to come after New Zealand. So
yeah, he'll be taking over. He'll be taking over soon.
It's coming.
Wellington.
It's on its way. Ryan, thanks so much, mate.
Awesome, guys. So great to see all of you. Jimmy, we need to have a beer pretty soon.
Yes, please. Let's do it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks,
Ryan.
Yeah, bud.
That is Ryan Nelsen. Currently working with FIFA. Man, I really enjoyed that.
Me too.
That's fascinating. And those TFC days, people forget, Jimmy, because I had forgotten that the team was pretty decent when you guys were canned, like in the playoffs. But at that time, Lewicki had just hired Bezpachenko. And I think Greg Vanny was in the academy, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Right. So they were having these backdoor meetings. In clandestine
Back alley
meetings.
meetings. Back
alley meetings, clandestine
I mean,
meetings.
maybe they were also doing that.
Hey, that could have been something great.
What's Toronto's pretty open.
And I mean, in the end, it worked out as far as they won championship, right? But yeah, I mean, Jimmy, it was odd, wasn't it? That era for Toronto FC.
Yeah, it was. I mean, look, a lot of times you're not privy to what happens, behind the scenes, or obviously with Nelly being a head coach and what he's dealing with, with upper management. But, I think we were happy with where the team was at, with what we had in that playoff position, 10 games left. And we thought, okay, we're getting into playoffs here. We got a good side. We got a good bunch of players that have bought into the way that we wanted to play. And, sometimes that's football. It doesn't go the way that you'd like to. And, you got to take those knocks.